Okay, so for the first part here, what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick demonstration of the Maryland Soil Health Card. Hopefully everybody got a copy. Has anyone used the health card before? Okay, great. When you look at it, it's going to be a little different now. We've recently made some changes to kind of help update and align more closely to the those of you who are using CART. So to try to help the assessments that you need to make in CART, make it more easily to use the health card and then translate that to CART. So we'll be posting this soon on the EFOTG, and we've actually got it now as a fillable PDF, but I printed it all out for you. But if you have any suggestions or anything, like I don't use CART regularly, so if there's other little tweaks that could make it easier for you, when you're going from the field into the office, just let me know, and that might be something we'll be able to do. So we're going to walk through really quick how to do the health card, and then we're going to have two soil pits that you're going to look at. So if you just want to flip and look at the card itself, for those of you who aren't familiar with this, this is basically an in-field assessment to kind of give you an idea of the status of soil health in the field that you're looking at. We've got 7 different indicators. So why don't I just run through them. So the first one is surface cover. So we're looking at what the cover of living and dead plant residue in the area where you're working. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. You can just make a visual estimate. If you look through the references, there's some picture guides that kind of show you what different percentages of cover look like. So if you're comfortable just looking at those references and comparing to what you see on the ground, you can do it that way. Another way that you can do is with a tape measure. You stretch the tape measure out, 10 feet, 20 feet, and then every 6 inches, look at the ground if there's cover or not, and then you make you write that down, keep track, and then you can figure out your percentage that way. So sometimes when you've got really spotty cover, it helps to do the tape measure because you can be a little more precise, and if you're not comfortable making that visual estimate. It's important if you're doing the tape measure though, make sure you're going, you don't want to just go down in between a row or something, you want to make sure you're kind of doing some random, so you might want to do 3 or 4 different areas and get an average. So when you look at the indicator and then on the card, you can see we've got descriptive ratings and then points assigned to them. So for surface cover, we'd look at, what percentage coverage we have. Now here, looking around, what do you guys think in this field here where we're standing? Excellent, right? Yeah, we're over 80% cover. So then for excellent, to kind of make this a bit more quantitative, you can assign points. So 9 to 11 points. We're pretty high right here, so we'd probably go 11 points, 100% coverage. If we were in a field that maybe had less coverage, we might go on the lower end of that excellent range, if it was closer to 80%. So that's kind of what you do there. You put your score in the score column, and then if you have any notes, if you want to make a note that you had 100% covered, there's space for you to do that there. The next one we have is infiltration. So this is how quickly water moves into the soil. So to do that, so what we do when we're doing infiltration, we're actually going to pour some water in the soil and see how quickly it goes. Now, important thing here is we are considering the texture of the soil, because if we have a really fine textured soil, water is going to move more slowly through it. So to make sure we're giving an even comparison, we want to consider what the texture of our soil is. So Jim's given me some of the soil. I'm going to texture it. So this soil has a sandy loam texture. It makes a short ribbon, and it's pretty gritty, okay? And we can walk through, if you need more practice with texturing, we can walk through that a little bit later, but there's a flow chart in here that kind of shows you how that's done. So Jim's got his 2-inch hole, and he's going to pour water in, and we're going to keep track of the time. Now, if you go to attachment C on the card here, we can see for a sandy loam, the expected infiltration rate would be 10 to 30 minutes. So when you look at how the scoring works for this indicator, basically, if you're faster than what we would expect, you would be in good or excellent. And if it's slower than that 10 to 30 minutes, it'd be getting a poor rating. So Jim's going to pour in the water. He's going to pour in 1 inch of water. and start the timer. And then basically we're gonna watch how quickly that water soaks in. And if you happen to get a weird, if your hole, maybe you sealed something up when you made your hole, like sometimes we've done it and it's like, this is really weird. We didn't expect it to be this slow, and we go somewhere else and we get a better infiltration. So sometimes it just helps you correct if you've, maybe sealed up the hole when you dug that little hole.
108.
Yeah, so this one was 1 minute and 8 seconds. So that's above our class of 10 to 30 minutes. So that's good, right? We know when we have a big rainstorm, water's going to soak into the soil fairly quickly. So just looking at our ratings, we would give this one an excellent because it's, it's just over a minute. Like that's really good.
And this being the soil health card is for the down and dirty, kind of talking to the producer and demonstrating the whole thing to him in probably 20 minutes. We do have the bucket kit, which has a lot more detailed experiments. Like for the infiltration, you get a metal cylinder that you beat into the ground and basically do it in that. And it just adds a little bit more to being able to do all those other tests. And then take about 2 hours to do using the bucket kit. So
it's a kind of quick and easy way to show. And these are all like things you can do without a whole lot of equipment. A landowner you're working with, like a producer, they can do this with equipment they have, and it really demonstrates what's going on in their soil. So the next one we have is compaction root growth. And you're basically just using a wire flag and seeing how easily you can push it into the soil. So you hold it up by the flag, 12 to 15 inches above the point, and you're just pushing it in to see how easily it goes in. And so this one you can see getting it to go, well over 8 inches. Some of the time I am having to wiggle it a little. Basically, if I'm having to wiggle it a lot, or if I can't push it through, that can tell me that I might have a pan in, a plow pan in there, some kind of compaction. So this is kind of a way you can sort of get an idea of if there might be any compaction. One thing is if you're working somewhere where you've got gravelly soils, if you're hitting stones, like that's not necessarily a pan or a compaction layer. So that might be something that you're just going to need to assess compaction looking at the soil and not with the wire flag. And so then you would rate this one kind of similarly, like, can I push it in really easily? Did I have a lot of wiggling that I needed to do? And you want to check a lot of different areas too. Make sure, and this is also why it's important when you're doing this test, you don't want to be right on the edge of the field, like in a turn row or something like that. You want to make sure you're out in the field, kind of a representative spot. All right. The next one we've got is organic matter. To assess organic matter in the field, we're looking at soil color. Darker soils, more organic matter. So what we do, and this is one change that you'll see now if you've used the health card before, we're now looking at two different depths in the soil. So we used to just look at the topsoil. And what we're finding is a lot of our soils where people have been practicing no-till, using cover crops, we're actually starting to get more organic matter starting to accumulate in those soils as a result of those soil health practices that they've adopted. And you'll see it in these soils, we're starting to get like a new horizon forming at the top that has a little more organic matter than that full plow layer. And so to kind of help you see that in the soil, we're actually going to look at the organic matter at 2 depths. So we're going to look in the top 3 inches and then from 3 to 8 inches. And it's possible that they might look exactly the same, but this is sort of a way to help you see if there's a difference there that you can identify in the field. When we're doing color, you're going to use the Munsell color book, which Jim's got right there. Has everyone used the color book before? Anyone need an explanation on that? Okay, so when we talk about color, we use this color book because it gives us a precise way to describe color rather than just saying brown. So there's 3 parts to it: hue, value, and chroma. The hue is kind of the red to yellow, green, blue, and so you'll see the hues on the different pages here. So I've got redder hues, keep going this way, they start to get more yellow. And then value is dark to light, so my low values are dark, and then as they go up, you see how the colors get lighter, that's value. And then going across the page is chroma, and that's the brightness of the color, or how pigmented it is. So our low chroma colors are in this this first column here, and then as I go across, they get brighter. So that's a higher chroma. So if we got a piece of soil.
So I'm digging out a biscuit, basically.
Yeah.
You dig down on 4 sides, the full length of the tile spade, and you pull it up. You can use this for the colors and also the amount of macroinvertebrates you have.
And structure.
And structure.
Yep. And so you don't want it to have it smeared or smushed in any way. So you might have to break open a PED so you have that undisturbed face. And the easiest way to do this is you hold the soil behind. There's holes in the pages, and so you can hold the soil behind and just kind of find the best matching color. And here we're looking at a 10YR 3.3 or 3.4. Okay.
And this is the upper. We're using the top 3 when we have these 2 topsoil layers. It's 0 to 3 basically, and then 3 to 8 is where we usually see some change. So this one here, we're starting to get into the subsoil. We don't have a whole lot of a, a deep plow layer here, at least doesn't appear to be. So we've got that color here. So we'll do another color right below that to see if there's any significant difference in that organic matter, looking at the color.
And I'm just breaking open this PED so I have a nice clean face to look at the color for. And so this one is 10YR 3.4. So we just got a slightly brighter chroma, a little less organic matter down there. But this one's a pretty subtle change. But it's good to note that because we're, basically seeing some differences, how the change in practices has sort of started influencing this soil. All right, so that's organic matter. Then we go to structure. So structure is how the soil particles hold together, how they naturally aggregate. So we're looking at structure, aggregation. There are our reference cards on the last page, I think it is, shows some examples of different types of structure. Granular, we get granular structure. That's the kind of like cottage cheese, popcorny looking shapes when we have a lot of organic matter. Basically, the organic matter and the biological activity kind of form those PEDs into those shapes. That's kind of what we're looking for in a soil. Blocky, that's when the PEDs or the aggregates, form little blocks. They can be different sizes. Platy is when the aggregates are horizontally aligned, and that can be a sign of compaction. And it's really problematic because if you've got those horizontal plates, any of the roots growing down, they can't get through that because all your pores are going sideways. So, your roots have to start growing sideways. Any water going into the soil has to move sideways. It can't just move through the soil. And then single grain and massive are actually considered structureless. Massive, there's no natural aggregation to the soil. It just breaks kind of however you want it to break. Oftentimes it's in really big clods. There's no natural planes of weakness. Single grain is just like loose, it doesn't have any structure. There's no organic matter binding it together in any sort of way. Like sand is always a really good example of single grain. If you think about like a beach, there's no aggregation to it. So for this one, again, we're looking at the structure in the upper part from 0 to 3 and then from 3 to 8, because as we're seeing those new A horizons forming, we're starting to see a difference between those two. So what I'll do is, it's good, you want to look at a lot of it. So, don't take like one little piece and go like, oh, that's, granular or whatever. You want to break it apart and just kind of see how it naturally breaks apart, what shapes you're seeing. This is pretty good. This is, there's some blocky, there's some granular.
So it could be more than one?
Yeah, sometimes you'll see multiple structures in there. So what you want to do is kind of figure out what's dominant, and that can also help you when you're using the health card and you're assigning the ratings, kind of like looking at what's dominant, but then also, okay, I've got some blocky, I've got some granular, so maybe I'm going to go on the low end of good because I've got that granular, but there's still some blocky, or maybe it's the high end of fair. Whereas if it's all granular, then you're going to go up higher in your score.
Granular in here too.
Yeah, and so Jim's got the 3 to 8 inches area, and there's some good granular in there too. So this is great. The other thing we can see is the roots are holding on to all that soil. So we've got good rooting growth through there. There's a lot of aggregates forming around the roots. So this is pretty good. Is there anything?
Again, we're in a perennial grass area here for over 20 years.
Right.
So we would kind of expect it to start to have this really good structure from the amount of organic matter in the organisms in here.
you know, if I was picking up a plant and the roots didn't hold on to any of it and just like it all fell clean, there would be no aggregation there. That wouldn't be so great looking. So just the way this is all holding together, that's a really good sign. Yeah, so for the macroinvertebrates and earthworms indicator, we're basically looking through and seeing how much, you know, how many critters we find in the soil. So we want to be looking at numbers that we see, the number of different types we see, and then, you know, depending on the time of year, if you're out in the winter, you may not find many earthworms because they're down deeper because it's cold. Or if you come out in the middle of summer and it's really hot and dry, they're down where it's a little more moist. So you also want to be looking for just evidence that there's earthworms and stuff there. So whether that's pores, earthworm casts and middens, so just kind of signs that they're there. So, you know, I think it's really easy to just count your earthworms and be done, but like you also want to look for those other indicators, and you might want to score it higher even if you don't find 6 earthworms or whatever. If you see a lot of evidence that there's earthworms there, you might want to still give it a good score or whatever, because of what you see. I found 1 earthworm here, but
You did? Okay. Well, I found 2, an ant and it looked like a termite type of thing.
okay. So we've got 3 different organisms, so that's a really good sign there, just that we've got that diversity.
And this is one of the things of using pesticides and herbicides a lot over the years, and synthetic fertilizers. That's what will destroy those microorganisms in there, the macroorganisms.
All right, and our last indicator is the soil odor. So you're actually going to smell the soil, and you know, ideally we want to smell that kind of earthy smell that's produced by the bacteria that are in the soil. So you're kind of, how well can you smell it, and how close does it need to get? You know, like, do you have to have your nose in there to smell it, or can you smell it from far away? Or if you don't smell anything, or even worse, if you smell something like, you know, a sulfide odor or some sort of chemical odor, like those are bad. We don't want to smell those things. So that kind of sweet, earthy odor.
We want to smell those are poor.
Well, yeah, if you smell it, that's poor. It's not ideal.
I'm getting it like about 4 or 5 inches away.
Yeah.
From your nose, so it's a little bit in between.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yep. Yeah.
So you could do either a high good or a low excellent.
Yep. Right. So one thing you'll notice at the bottom, there's this table down here, and this will make more sense when you look at it as a fillable PDF. And I have to give credit to Tyler because this was his suggestion. When you use it as a fillable PDF, this at the bottom will actually, it'll take your scores that you put in, and it'll tell you basically which the resource concerns in CART are a concern. So, you know, if whether or not compaction is significant, and then your ratings for organic matter depletion, habitat loss, and aggregate instability. So this kind of does the crosswalk for you. And so you can basically do the card, and then this is telling you that what would go into CART. You know, it's always good to be thinking through these things in your head as well, but as kind of to help you be more consistent when you're making that crosswalk. The idea is that this kind of does it for you. If you're just doing it, you know, with a piece of paper in the field, you can go back into the office, then put it into your fillable PDF, and then it'll pop up for you. And you can just ignore it while it's on the paper in your field. But for those who are, you know, tech savvy and can do the fillable PDF in the field, that's an option for you. When you add up the indicators, you do get a total score at the end. And you'll see I've got it set up so that it'll, on the fillable PDF, it totals it for you, and it gives you your overall rating of excellent, good, fair, or poor. And it's nice to have that overall thing, but, you know, when you're working with a producer, it's also important to look at, like, okay, which indicators in particular were of issue. You know, overall they might be good, but maybe there was a lot of compaction. And so when we're thinking about, you know, recommended practices, you know, you want to think about, like, how are we going to address that particular issue? And maybe, you know, biodiversity is fine, but, you know, you want to address that compaction issue. So it's important to look at the individual indicators because they're telling you, you know, about different properties in the soil. And we also, as part of the instructions, there are, where do we have that? Kind of recommended conservation practices based on what indicators, you know, have been scoring low. It's on one of these pages. Oh, there it is. Yeah, so just, you know, if you scored low on these indicators, these are some recommended practices that would be useful.